Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Amir, and welcome everyone on this webinar on our guidance about ERAS application and personal statement. Yasir, do you hear my voice clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So on our panelist, we have Dr. James Kumar. He is a program director and clinical professor at CAR. The next in line, we have Dr. Yasir Sattar. He is a cardiology fellow at West Virginia University and also a well-renowned researcher. So with that, my name is Amir and I'm currently PGY4 chief here at CAR Hospital. I think we can start the presentation and Dr. Kumar will join us along the way.
Amir, thank you so much for introducing me. So guys, I've been getting a lot of questions about how to enter research data in an ERAS application. I think it's pretty important to know, because you can make a very terrible mistakes in your ERAS. And also it's pretty confusing that there's so many sections which you have to fill. So we're going to talk about that in a moment, okay?
All right. With that, agenda for today is we will talk about ERAS application, mainly CV and personal statement, do's and don'ts, and then at the end we will have question and answer session. You can post your question in the chat box and we'll follow along the way as we go forward. So the first thing we're going to talk about is ERAS application, mainly the ERAS CV. So the question is, which one is important, CV versus personal statement? The answer to that question is I think in the applicant mind is they work really hard on personal statement, but CV, I think they do not work that much as per my experience, as per reviews. So CV is very, I think, more important because that's the thing that keeps you on the your recruitment list, while all the recruitment committees, they do see your CV multiple times as compared to personal statement when they just see it one time while interviewing you. So spend as much time as possible on CV. That's the key point here. Second is proofread. So that no matter how much I stress, that's extremely important. The way you can proofread is you can print it out and you can, as soon as you update your CV, you can give it to your friend or a family who is really good in proofreading. So that's one way to go forward. Information should on both application and also the personal statement should be accurate as per all the guidelines without any plagiarism or anything. So I will dive down through the application as per ERAS, and that I took screenshot from my own a fellowship application, but it's the same. So the first section on ERAS application, as you know, it's about the personal information, and that I think everyone is aware of. Account information, basic information, address, those are the same. I don't think so this is any confusion about that part. Moving forwards to the only thing is that you might have a question that will be the work authorization. So currently, if you have any work authorization, you will say yes. If you don't, you say no. So I think most of the applicant will not have, so it will be clicked as no. Regarding visa, you can click J1. Obviously, H1 only if you are done with your step 3 or if you are completing your step 3 while the interview. So you can click on that. This part I think is very important, in regards to the ID, NRMP ID that you will be getting after you submit your application, and in few weeks after submission, you will be prompted to get your NRMP ID. So the importance of this is if you don't put your NRMP ID, it's very hard for program to find you for the match. So it connects your application with the matching process. So always once you're get your email from ERAS that now you can take your NRMP ID, just make sure that take the ID and put it here and update it. Otherwise, it will be kind of it happens with few of the applicants that they forget to put that in. Moving forward, this slide I think is pretty clear. If you have done ACLS or BLS, you can update it here. If you have not, then it's completely fine before joining the residency or in the first few, before even joining the residency, you will be given that opportunity by the program. So if you have not done it, it's completely fine. But if you have done it, then you can put the dates in. I think for all the international medical graduates, in their program, there's no alpha omega status, so it will be no for both of the last two categories. This section is optional. That's about the biographic information for candidates applying from European countries. They don't need to click anything apart from non-European, so they can click if they want to. This is just optional, so you can click any of the countries which you belong to. Next section is about the education. Anyone who is outside the US is the undergraduate or the graduate's degree, so you will click none. If you are in the US and you have the degree, your graduate and the undergraduate degree from the US, then only then you will put that entry section in this higher education. Otherwise, I think in 90% of the case, it will be none. And the same will be medical education. There you have to put your medical school. Moving forward, we have our next section that is on the membership. So like people from like and all the countries like Pakistan, India, and any other country, they do have their local societies. So you can like put your society name in there, but make sure you are a member of that society. In award section, it will be only medical school award, and in other awards or accomplishments, you can also put like not medical school related like awards that maybe there's in kind of like a extraordinary award that you received during your undergraduation, you can put it there too. So or anything that's not related with medical school, you can put those awards in your accomplishments. So it's completely acceptable. Next in line, we have training section. This section, most of the applicant will not have anything to add because this is just like ACGME residency, because this is my own, I took the shots from my own application, but for the applicants who are applying for residency, I don't think so there will be anything until unless it's AOA or the ACGME residency that you have done previously if you're within the US and doing some residency. Otherwise, I don't think so there will be any information that you'll be placing in this section. Now is the important part. That is the experience part. The previous information was just like the basic information. The main focus of this whole this session is like to get you like a real like I think experience how you're gonna place your experience in that ERAS application. These are the section that you will be talking about in more in your interviews, because these will be the section that will connect you to the next person. That is research, your volunteer experience, any QA project, quality improvement projects, or any hobbies. So mostly the interviewee, like they select any of the portion from these categories and start talking about that. This is very important, ERAS application experience. So in the experience section, you see here clearly how are you going to write that experience. So if you read the lines, first lines in the experience, so an applicant is writing as, I worked in Cleveland Clinic for 1 month. I managed patients with diverse clinical condition. I was very hardworking and everyone was admired for my work. Versus another applicant B who writes as, worked as a clinical elective student at Cleveland Clinic for 1 month under the supervision of Dr. Ajay and the medical team. During this rotation, my responsibilities include chart review of admitted patients, participated in morning and noon conference, brief bedside teaching. So here is important, like, so what's the difference between these two statements? The first one is more focused about I, so don't use the word of I. So that's one thing. The second thing is you have to mention like, what was your role? Second is under which supervision you were doing. Third is like clearly defining what you have accomplished or what were your responsibilities. These are like kind of like in a very refined way, like to place your experience instead of just like vaguely describing things. So I think this is a very important slide.
Hey, Amr, is it okay if I add something on here?
Yeah, Dr. Kumar, sure. Thank you.
So this is Dr. James Kumar, one of the program directors. So just a point to add is I know perhaps some of these observerships or externship, I'm told they let the applicants do physical exam. From a program director's point of view, it's very, very important. I mean, even if you're doing those, you're not supposed to because you're not a licensed provider, nor are you a student. Now, if you come in as a student during your medical, training, and then you do an elective, now that's different. You can actually examine, patients. But otherwise, your role in these experiences are an observer, and you're not supposed to examine them. So now I'm sure there are some places they let you examine the, but even if they do, please don't mention because you're actually breaking the law if you examine patients, as an observer. I hope I'm making that clear. Some people think that they get a one up if they say, "Oh, I examined patients in my observership. It's a hands-on experience." You're actually not getting any extra points because you're not following the rules of of United States, where only licensed providers or students, in electives, they are the ones who can do physical exam. You can observe, and gosh, you learn a lot as an observer. So just FYI.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. I think that was a really important point. So, like, Dr. Kumar, like, can you describe it more? Like, if there is a clinical externship experience, how can they describe it more in like what are the sentences that you would recommend to use in those experience?
Yeah, and I've seen people write like two or paragraphs, just kind of going on and on. Perhaps that's not the way to go. I like Dr. Amir, I like what you've written here. Nice bullet points of exactly what happened. And yes, please don't say I did this and I did that. And this is kind of a language that you have to develop. And you have to probably take off the I and clearly do bullets though. I, chart review of a patient, participated in conferences, and then, participated in quality reviews, right? So these are the things. And yes, I think somebody put in there saying in a chat, observed patients under the supervision. Observations, every observation is fine. You're not supposed to do physical exam as an observer. So bullet points are great, easy to read, user friendly. If it's a huge paragraph, people just don't read it. And yeah, it has to be very factual. And I think, yeah, Dr. Amir's example here is actually very good.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. And one more thing, Dr. Kumar, would you comment on like putting experience, like work experience versus research experience and like the volunteer experience? Some of the applicants have the question that would that make any difference if by mistake or sometimes the applicant does not know which category this experience would lie in? So would that change the like the program perspective on that line?
Yeah, so general rule is work is if you're, I would say if you're getting paid for something, that's considered work, right? If you're kind of doing something now, then if it's not work, is it education? Is it observership? It's how you define it as. But just remember, volunteering is where I would generally say, as a physician, as a foreign graduate who's in the United States, and you volunteer, to work with some faculty and, doing observership, I don't know if that's truly volunteering. Volunteering is you going to help out, in a community where they want people to paint houses. So it's not, and you're going to help out. Or if you're going to, help, in a soup kitchen, you're going to help people serve food to homeless people. That's volunteering, right? And see that does that make sense? Because it's not part of your physician skill set, right? If you're doing something that's not your physician skill set, then it's and something for the betterment of the community, that is volunteering. Now I know many people kind of use, if they do pulse polio thing, they say they volunteer and all that, which is okay. I guess you can use it. There's no strict rule. Now in terms of research experience, I think it's very clear, right? If you're actually doing a research project, it's a research experience. But just remember, though, work experience, if you're going to put the name of supervising person who's on, under whom you're working, um, you know nothing can stop people from firing an email to that person and say, did you actually work there? So just remember that, simply because work is, they should have a record. And if they say, no, we don't even know this person was ever working under us, and that's a big issue. So I would make sure that, I have a legitimate job, working in a hospital or a clinic, right? And I was, I worked there, and they can actually provide a reference for me if I'm going to list something as work. So then it's also a question. So people do a lot of observerships, and they list it under volunteer activity because they'll say, well, I wasn't paid for it, and I just wanted to develop my CV. And I think that's fine. But truly, though, volunteer experience is what you do outside your physician skill set. I think that's kind of something that you would expect.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for elaborating that clearly. On the same line, I think one applicant, Anusha, asked the questions. Can we say learned how to use Epic in our experience? I think that should be fine.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. If you learned how to use Epic, you should list it. People really like that you're familiar with it. And then, yeah.
Okay. I will leave the other chat to in the very end so that we can complete the session at time. All right. So moving forward, this section, I will leave it to Dr. Star, who has very much experience into research. So over to you, Dr. Star.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar, for nicely explaining how to add on the experience. I will also like to add that most of the IMGs, when you go for a J1 visa or H1 visa, they actually look at your CV. And if you mention like that you have worked as an externship or you physically examined the patient, then sometimes they reject the visa because B1, B2 visa, which you get for your observerships, you can't touch the patient. So this is one thing I'll be very careful also if you're IMG. So I will also elaborate about the research. So in the ARAS, there's like multiple sections of adding your papers. So initial sections, you're gonna see peer-reviewed journal articles / abstracts. You're gonna see peer-reviewed journal articles / abstracts other than published. Peer-reviewed book chapters, which is pretty straightforward if you publish any book chapter. Scientific monograph. So what is a scientific monograph actually means? It's basically an issue of one of the journal, like where multiple authors, like somewhat like 15, 20 authors wrote a consensus statement or wrote like a issue on any major topic together. So that's what we have, like a scientific monograph. And then we have poster presentations. So Amir, do you mind going to the next slide? So first, I would like to explain like how you basically add peer-reviewed articles. So basically peer-reviewed articles where you have open access or without open access, you go through the peer review process where journal reviewers give you a review, and then you get an email from the journal reviewers. And then whether they accept your article or do like a minor revision or major revision, and then your article eventually get published. So that's what we actually mean by the peer review. Let me show you my CV as an example. Amit, do you mind if I share my screen for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sure. So guys, I'll show you my screen. So here, if you see like these are peer-reviewed journal articles / abstracts in my fellowship CV. So one thing that is very important is make sure your pattern is same for everything you're adding, and there should not be any redundancy. Because that doesn't look like professional or good in your CVs. So you're gonna have last name and then comma and a first initial and then a period and a comma and then you put like a next names. Now it's totally fine if you mention like a 3 names and then you do at all, and then you're gonna have a period and then you're gonna have title and then you can have like a journal full name. Now you can use journal NLM catalog, which is a short mnemonic of full journals. You can use and you can search for any journal NLM catalog by Googling. Like for example, for Jack, it will be like something like j.am.ac, something like that, right? So you can use like any NLM catalog. And then you put the years and then basically the date, and this number is the volume and the issue, and then you have the page numbers, and then the publication status you can put like published if it's published. So it's also very important to add on that. So this first article which I'm showing you in my CV is basically a abstract. So the problem in the ERAS is like abstract and articles are added together in the peer reviewed section. Now, sometimes program, when they review the CV, they're like, oh, he published in Jack. Oh, he published in such a big names. But actually what I wanted to show you here is, so this is the full article, right? So, because this is not something like supplementary. But if you see something supplementary like that have like a S in it, so that's probably an abstract because abstracts are published as a supplementary section in any journal, while full publication is not a supplementary, it goes to your main journal. So if you see like my format is pretty much same. I'm adding all the authors, so but it's totally fine if you add just first 3 authors and then you're doing at all basically. Let me see. Okay, so here, if you see something like this, S1 to S29, this is basically a supplemental section that shows that this is an abstract. Now, where this abstract got published, it's a CCI meeting in 2020 Society of Interventional Cardiology. So that's how programs know that, okay, this is a supplemental abstract. He published like X number of abstracts, X number of papers. So that's how you're gonna put like a published status. And then I'll walk you through like a other than published status. So next section is other than published status. So typically same format you're gonna follow, and then author names and then title, and after title you're gonna have journal full name. If you're following NLM catalog short version, just you're gonna put that. Here I'm using like a full name of the journal, so I want to be consistent with the format. So then it's the date, and then here obviously you will not gonna put like a PubMed ID or something. You're gonna put like just in press accepted. So once it gets accepted, then the articles go to production and in press, and then it get published. So it's a step-by-step process. You're gonna have submitted status, you're gonna have accepted status, and then you're gonna have in press status, which you're gonna find in the EROS application. So please be careful, whatever the status of your article is, just put that one also. Now let's suppose you're submitting your application on 15, you're submitting article on same day, just put it as a submitted status. Don't put it as a press status, even if you think, oh, your article is really such a good quality and you think that it will get published. Who knows, sometimes it gets rejected and you might have to change a journal. So as publishing can take something like 4 to 6 months for any article. So you're gonna see like a couple of like submitted status in my CV. You're gonna see like in press status and provisionally accepted status. Now next is the peer-reviewed book chapters. So here you're gonna follow the same. It's a little bit different formatting here. So you're gonna have like author name, then year, then title, and like publication, like where it got published, where does that publication house belong to, and what's the company. So that's those are my book chapters. And then you're gonna have abstract posters. So one thing I wanna mention here is sometimes people publish like full article, and before you publish full article, you publish same abstract because initially you wanna showcase your work to the national meetings, and then you do a oral presentation on that one, and same one you did a poster on that one. So you can add it into 4 sections. Yes, you can add it into 4 sections, but it will make your CV look so bigger. So I'll leave up to you. Like if you're adding it 4 times, that's still acceptable because the same you did it as a poster, same you did it as an oral presentation, same you did it as an abstract and a full publication. It's actually helpful if you add it 4 times because now based on my experience in my program and talking to my seniors, that program we're going to think that, okay, this guy always finish his task because whatever research project he's starting, he's showcasing that project in the national meetings, and then he's able to publish it as a full abstract. Then he go to the national meetings, and then he did an oral presentation and a poster also. So it shows that whatever you start, you are able to finish your task also. So other than that, you're going to have oral presentation similarly. So let me show you the poster presentation format. So again, you're going to have last name and the first initial. That's how you're going to add your authors. And then for posters, you're going to have date also, like when you presented this, and then you have title, and then which meeting. Poster presented at European Society of Cardiology, and where was the meeting? Amsterdam, Netherlands. So that's how you add all the posters. And then you have oral presentations, similar format as you added the posters. Author, you're gonna add authors, then the date, like and a meeting where you presented your oral posters. Amir, you can share your screen now. I want to see if I missed any other content from the AWS application.
If you are involved in a scholarly work, but you are not the presenting author, but then that poster is presented by the first author at a conference, you could still list, because if you are a co-author, you can list that as one of your thing, even though you didn't go and present. I think that's something that you can do because you are involved in the way. If you're a co-author, you can list that. You don't need to be the oral presenter, so that's a thing that you could do.
Okay, so here thank you so much, Dr. Kumar. I would also like to add, there's like submitted status you can see here for other than published. You have provisionally accepted and accepted and in press. What's the difference between provisionally accepted and accepted? It's a little confusing. So when you get a minor comments from your peer-reviewed journals, so sometimes they mention like, we provisionally accepted your article based on like if you fix the minor comments. So then that's the time when you're gonna mention it as a provisionally accepted. But if you get a major comments, don't put it as a provisionally accepted because not all the times major comments get accepted.
Thank you, Dr. Yasser, for explaining so nicely on the research part. So with that, we'll move on over to next section on personal statement. Just a second. Okay. So few things. A person statement is very important part of our application. Um, all the like my panelists are welcome to just comment on each part. So my take point on person statement is what I think it's very important. It needs to be a story. It needs to be only you who is writing. So the first paragraph usually it should tell us that why medicine or why you choose this profession. And while writing that, you need to be very realistic. Avoid complex literature and jargon. Just be simple in that. And yeah, those are that's kind of like a first paragraph. Total, it's recommended one page person statement with 4 to 5 paragraphs at the max, not more than one. Like I would not like go above the one page summary. So it will be like too much for the reader to read. Second paragraph, you can give a patient example that inspired you and what was your role in that? Did you help your team to diagnose a patient and that inspired you to choose medicine? So that's, I think, sometimes is helpful, and I think that's one person should mention that. And the other thing is that in the person statement, what I have read, like multiple person statements, it means like more than medicine, what are you as a person? You can mention in that part your best rewarding moment of your life if you remember anything that if you have done something extraordinary that differentiates you from other applicant. That's what a program would like to see in you. So is there a story that's linked with you? So that's how it's going to be a personal statement that's very personal to you. So that would be the second paragraph. Third, you can talk about the U.S. healthcare system, and with that, you can talk about why you're choosing U.S. For your healthcare education. You can connect that in different spectrum, like your adaptability to your U.S. healthcare system, like what are your aspirations while you're in the U.S. healthcare system, or what are the reasons that you would like to be in U.S. healthcare system. So while talking about that, never backbite about your parents' health system where you're coming from, and because it looks bad as like a personality. So that's the point on the third paragraph. On fourth, you can talk about your strength, your weakness sometime, but in a way that shows that you are kind of like accepting, and that's the point where you can even tell your red flags if you have in a like a honest way and in a way that tells that you are like you're not a failure, and if any failure happens, then how did you cope with that failure and how did you change your failure into your success. So I think that's the part that really differentiates you from other applicants. Never pose yourself as a superhero, because like things that you guys mentioned with this like your personal statement, then you have to fulfill those things. I think the best line that I received at my graduation was from Dr. Kumar, that keep your personal statement with yourself after graduation and read every day, so that you know. So whatever you have put on your personal statement, then you have to act like that. So it's like that. The last paragraph, where you see yourself in 5 years. So that's one way to describe that. Either way, if you are going into a kind of research-oriented program and mainly university program, then you can write 2 personal statement, one for community. That's like my thought process, but I would appreciate Dr. Kumar comment on that. And the last thing is, if you are not sure what you're going to do in the next 5 years, that's completely fine. It's the option and the field is open for you. So you can, while you are going through the residency, you can see what best fit for you, and you can choose accordingly. These are the don'ts even mentioned on the ECFMG website. So never say bad about your parent healthcare system. Never mention any patient identity, not like even any physician name in your personal statement. I think, and never mention any research reason to join the program if this is no research in the program, but it is kind of like a comment that it could be modifiable. Sometimes programs don't have a research and they want a research person to be in their program. So this comment I would just like modify in that regard. So never pose yourself as a superhero, and try not to be super emotional and too dramatic, and always proofread. And on the proofread part, you all can use grammarly.com and connect it with your Google, and your all the emails and all the ERAs will be proofread. Like that's the one phase of proofreading. So you can use that as your proofreading experience. Um, I, I will invite Dr. Kumar on to comment on the personal statement, and like what you think on making it like a good personal statement from your point of view.
Yeah, thank you. I think perhaps earlier on I felt maybe personal statement is very, very important. I understand CV is equally important. Lately, just because applicants are so competitive, they all have phenomenal scores, very, very fantastic, medical transcripts in the medical school. They've all won awards, gold medals, and right, they want to come here and they want to get into top residencies. um, Program directors are now looking at personal statements to look for what I like to call emotional intelligence. Is this person, is this applicant, you know, are they coming into medicine and into residency because they want to get better? Or are they actually coming on to residencies to actually serve the patients, right? That serving attitude is coming out. And that's where, if you say, I did CPR and I saved someone, I felt really good. That's probably, eh, only 20% of the time in hospital CPR is actually, ends up resulting in anything positive. So you're not going to be really happy when you do residency, or because if every time you give CPR and expect, people to recover, that's not going to be, it's not going to be your shot in the arm. So think about that element of yourself. And if you're coming into residency to US and you want to do fellowship, you want to do cardiology, you want to do interventional cardiology, you want to work real hard, which is great. But remember, you are doing that deep down, you all are doing that probably because you want to serve people. And so remember, that needs to come out in your personal statement. Not that you are a doctor, you want to be a cardiologist because you're in a family of cardiologists. If you start that, if your personal statement starts with that line, people are going to just throw it away. They say, you know what, this person has a God complex, which is something that we think, it's very common. God complex. I deserve to be, because my father's a doctor, I need to be a doctor. I've seen my dad work really hard, so I'm going to be just like him. No, this is, even though it's a personal statement, we want to know, we want to see what your true reason is, right? And I'm sure you are all actually in it because you want to care for people, and not because you want to become like your father or your uncle. Or does that make sense? So just try to make sure that the reasons you put in are actually emotionally intelligent. That's the better word that I can use. And that is personal statement. And it need not have, a fantastic diagnosis that you did, because the role of the personal statement is not to showcase your medical knowledge or your clinical acumen or your clinical reasoning skills or your publications or your presentations. That's the CV, right? This personal statement is to show a different part of you, right? That internal drive that you have. Why do you do this? Why do you keep getting every day? And if the odds are stacked up against you, you still get, you know what, I want the best education, I want the best residency training, I want to get better, I want to get into a really good fellowship. Why? Because I want to serve people. I think that has to come across in the personal statement. It need not be about your medical knowledge. It need not be about the publication that you did. Even if you're going to mention those, try to connect it emotionally as to why you're doing all this. And take it from me though, as someone who's done it for so long, that connection is it's what's going to keep you going. Dr. Amir or Dr. Sattar, I mean, they can tell you why they are publishing, why they are doing all this. is because at deep down the line, it's not that they want to get their name in a publication and they want to put it, because they want to see, you know, whatever I do, I want to try to see if what I do can actually improve patients' care, patients' lives. That has to be your true core. And that has to come out in your letter. And that's where you can be very frank and say, you know, I'm not decided as to what I want to become. And many program directors like that, especially in internal medicine. I know this is for everything else too. But if you're undecided in terms of what you want to do, specialize, that's fine. But you can stay true to that core that, hey, I still want to help people. I think that's the key. Now, many times I read personal statements which mention why I became a doctor. Now, while you could write that, remember, you're already a doctor. You know, you kind of crossed that step. So you can talk a little bit about the reason you went into medicine, but don't dwell on it a lot, because you have achieved, you know, what many people in your home country have not achieved. You actually completed a medical training, right? So that's very important. But the reasons are always important. But again, one of my major pet peeves is I'm coming from a family of doctors. That's why I got into medicine. And you couple that, and then you when people read, and then many, you know, program directors here, even American program directors, are very well versed with the names of the medical schools, you know, that you're applying from. And if they know it's a private medical school, and then you're coming from a family of doctors, they're going to put two and two together and say, you know what, maybe this person is not the best candidate for my residency. So remember, try to make the reasons very clear, and then try to talk about some of your weaknesses. If you're a, you know, over analyzing person, if time management was an issue, these are things that everybody goes through. And it's not uncommon for people to list that and say, you know, I try to understand things a lot, which you know, which makes me, you know, slow down a lot. And you can write about that and say, I'm working on these skills and I'm trying to, you know, diagnose things. And the other thing is, you know, you can talk about your ability to handle high volumes of patients. I know many of you are very good at that in your clinics, in your outpatient clinics. I'm sure you see in a day up to 60, 70 patients in a day. You can talk about that, and then you can say, at times I feel I don't dig deep in, right? And that's your weakness, right? So these are all examples of weakness which we love to hear about, right? Because we know you're so introspective that you're actually looking inside and actually finding areas to improve, right? Don't think that you're exposed to a weak area and then, you know, of course, if you are, you know, failure in step two, step one, that should be listed. I mean, I would want you to list that right and center. I failed this exam. Don't try to give excuses and just say, you know, you got to go as it is. You got to take the bull by the horns. So I think that's a precious statement. Just keep it to one page, though. We don't generally don't want to see more than one page. And I think it should be fine if you guys write it that way. That's all I have to say about personal statements.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar. It was very nicely explained. To summarize that, I think the God-fearing complexity and other thing was like showing weakness in a way that you are working or improving. That's important. And then also you're like the abilities, like rather than like as Dr. Kumar mentioned, like you're already a doctor, you have to like step further like from that point onward. And like, yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kumar, for that. Right. So with that, like we can open up our question answer session. And with that, we have our first question. Okay, we have a lot of questions actually. So I will start from the start. So question from Lina Sayed is, for research experience, do we mention it on our profile as a research assistant or research volunteer? So.
Either one is fine. I'll say research assistant is also you're assisting in the research. Doesn't mean like you're getting paid. Volunteer is more kind of like you were volunteering and kind of like that kind of like more like a volunteer thing, like Dr. Kumar mentioned. Like you went outside for some giving some polio shots and someone was doing a research on that one. So that will be like more kind of like a volunteer thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The next question is from Krishna. The question is, would you like to see US clinical experience such as co-rotation and elective rotation done in third year and fourth year rotation as a part of medical school under work experience of EROS to show the program that applicant has good US clinical experience, or should I just leave for MSPE? So, so I will ask Dr. Kumar about this. Like,
Yeah, I think, yeah, oh yeah, if you have hands-on US clinical experience as a third year or fourth year, you should mention that separately. I think in MSP it will come through, but gosh, it's so inconsistent. Countries all over the world, they don't seem to follow the MSPE guidelines as well as they should. So I would separately list that it's a US clinical experience.
thank you, Dr. Kumar. The next question we have from Sumaya Usman. Question is, working in a clinic as a provider's assistant and having opportunity of examining the patient, is that considered to be violation of law?
Yeah, it's like if you have a work visa or work authorization and you're employed and that's part of your job, I think that should be fine. But I think Dr. Sattar made it very clear, if you're on a visit visa and you're doing this, it's just, yeah, people don't like to see that part. So.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. The next question is from Ponam Luhana, and the question is for pathology application, can we mention grossing under supervision of doctor? So I'm not sure about that, but it's like
that is a tricky area, right? Yeah, if that was part of the, again, it's just going to be a question of work status and license and things like that. I think if you're on a learning kind of as a student, if you come in, it's different. But once you get licensed, if you complete your training and you're a professional, it's just very, very, you got to be very careful as to what you list you're able to do. So I'm not really sure about pathology, guys. Perhaps this should be addressed by someone else. So.
Yeah.
I would like to add here, I think it's just observation, because in pathology, you can't touch the patient. Pathology is all about observation. So I personally think it will be fine because you're gonna touch slides, but touching slides, I don't know what, it's funny in a way, but I don't know what difference.
Well, thank you. The next question is from Faryal Murtaza. Question is, can we put the link of the article as well in the experience, in the research section? So.
It will gonna make it longer, but it's not needed. As long as you have a PubMed ID or full title, someone can easily track on. It's totally fine. Just make sure it's consistent with the format.
Yeah, if you have a PubMed ID listed, ERAS has a nice filter. One of the things, whatever you put in, ERAS can filter things out. So if we are looking at like 10,000 applications for like 20 positions, and we can easily pull out applicants with a PubMed ID listed in their thing, which again, I know how difficult it is to publish with a PubMed ID. It's some hard work. You got to work with with a group of people. So, or alone, you've done some work, your first author, second author, third author. Yeah, if you're able to get some publication with a PubMed ID, a very good job. Many higher level programs look for that because automatically they know that there's a high quality publication that you're a part of. And if you're going to write about a publication, you better know in and out about that article. Because if you don't know what you're putting in there and during interview they ask you some questions you are like struggling to answer, I would not put that in there because it's just gonna, they're just gonna say this fellow just was, one of the 20 people who are listed as co-authors and probably didn't do much. And so again, another thing, just caution when you do these.
Yes, I would like to add on here, Dr. Kumar nicely explained. So when you publish some of the time, applicants publish so much, then it's really important you take your time to sit down and study in and out. They can ask you any clinical trials. That was the downside when I applied for my fellowship. I had to read all the clinical trials, everything, whatever I published on, because programs expect you, if you are doing a research article, a review article, that means you're writing a summary on topic that have been published before. So it's presumed that you get to know in and out of that topic.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar and Dr. Star. With the interest of time, we have a lot of questions, but I'll be very quick. The question is from Fiza Zulfikar, and the question is it advisable to highlight your name in the publication you mentioned?
It's fine. You can do that. It's totally fine. Or you can just leave it unhighlighted.
Now, generally, I would put the last author because that's generally the professor who's kind of in charge of that. And I don't know, Dr. Satar, what your experience is. I'd list, if especially the last author is like a big wig, a big name, then I would list the last author because that's usually the, overseeing author.
Yes, yes, it's a very important point. If you have very senior as a last author, definitely you should mention that.
All right. The next question is from Radhe Patel, and the question is: she is working at a cancer institute under the supervision of a head of microbiology. Would his LOR hold value in internal medicine? That's what I presume from the question. So a letter for internal medicine from microbiology. So Dr. Kumar, do you see like in context of that, like when you read the letters? So.
Oh yeah. I think if this is, can be one letter. I think they can talk about your work ethic and your acumen in, infectious disease and things like that. I think that's fine. And of course the letter has to be phenomenally strong if it's non-internal medicine letter, right? And I think that's a very important thing. So they should talk about, really, I've seen people list, whenever it's a non-IM, non-internal medicine or non-family medicine doctors writing letters, or a PhD, they'll actually list all the work that you did in their lab. And if you did a 1 year like a lab, research assistant or something like that. So yes, but it could be just one letter. I would stick to clinicians because they, you're going to do a clinical residency, not a research residency.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. The next question is from Aditi, and he thanks the panelists. Question to Dr. Kumar: should repeat applicant mention it in their personal statement?
Yes, we can easily find out from NRMP history if you have previously been in a match, and that is actually considered a negative thing. So that some reason you went through the match and you didn't get into a residency position. It's not because you didn't get in, it's like you may have a reason, and maybe you didn't, have enough money to get a lot of, get into a lot of applications or go to a lot of places. I know there are several reasons. But you didn't match, then write the reason out. I was not prepared, and I did not have adequate resources to have a widespread, application interviewing, and I did not match. But if you talk about that in your personal statement, I think it's very valid because we know that information, that you already gone through a match, and you didn't get into a residency.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. The next question is from Amber Mehboob, and the question is: what is the role of letter of intent in the residency process, and how important are those?
Yeah, so I know we get a lot of emails, sent to the program coordinator and sometimes to the program director. We generally ask people not to write those emails. Now, I understand internal medicine is going to do a supplementary system this time around, and I don't know if anyone has an opportunity to look at the website in ERAS. There's some signal points that you can, show interest in a particular residency if you really like that residency. If you're going to write a letter of intent, though, just make sure you actually type down that letter. Don't copy paste your template and keep changing the names to University of Illinois, Northwestern University, Mayo Clinic. from our end, it's very clear you actually did a cut and paste. And it's just so irritating that you're using a letter of intent that you're the residency I want to come to, but then you're sending this to like 25 other different programs, right? So just make sure the letter of intent, if you're ever writing a letter of intent to the program director or the program coordinator, make it really personal. It should be very, very strong connection to the program that you're talking about. You have a friend who lives there, your family's there, you like this, really close connection that it can't be cut and paste. Because I see that all the time, and I can look at the letter and immediately know that this person is just using a template and then kind of changing the names of the program, and then sending it around. So just a piece of caution, if you're writing letter of intent, just make sure it's a true letter written to the program director or the program coordinator.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. That was very good point. One question from my own, like, how are we seeing the letters of like a telemedicine rotation this time?
Oh yeah, something is better than nothing, guys. If you don't have a in-person observership, US clinical experience, telemedicine will be just fine. Oh, one point I wanted to add though, this was recently came up in the program directors forum. If you have an opportunity to do ACLS in your home country, go ahead and do this. If it's something that it's affordable, I know many places it's available. BLS, ACLS, it kind of shows, especially for someone who's been, if you've been around out of the medical school for 2 years, or more, I would just kind of do this, this course, and it kind of gives you some sort of street cred that, hey, you know what? You actually keep your certifications intact. And this is very important. If you have an opportunity to do that, I would go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. We have a lot of questions, but I think we're left with 5 more minutes. I'll be very quick. Next question is from Aneri Patel. And the question is, if someone has green card and has done physical exam in an externship, is that a violation of law? So it comes, I think, with the license, not with the the green card versus your IMG. So it's not it is not according to the law.
Yeah, I think what Dr. Sattar mentioned was an additional element. If you're on a B2 visa and you're examining, it's not only license, you're also breaking the the immigration visa issues, which are much bigger. So I know it sounds very exciting to do physical exams, but I wouldn't do it. If you have an opportunity, observe, and they can write letters based on your medical knowledge, how enthusiastic you are in reviewing articles, evidence-based practices, things like that. So I think that should be the strength.
Thank you. Next question is from Fiza Zulfikar, and the question is it okay to use LOR of a different specialty while you're applying in medicine?
Yes, any clinical thing is fine. Even with the psychiatry, if you had an opportunity to work with the psychiatry, it's fine.
Thank you. The next question is from Samin Amir. If you have a published article, do you mention it in a research experience as well and explain your role, or you just mention it in the publication section? So I think if it's published, so you just mention in the publication section. Or if it is kind of like your job that you have done for 1 year, like you've done job at like a Harvard and it was 1 year experience, that will count as like you can mention in there in your research experience. And plus during that time, if you have published something, that will go into publication section. So that's how it is. Okay, and the next one we have a question from Sundas. Is it ethical to mention family health issue as a motive to pursue medical career for the personal statement? It's tricky. I will leave it to Dr. Kumar.
Yeah, I wouldn't mention it. So,
okay.
All right, guys. Hey, I have to take off. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar, for your precious time.
Thank you so much.
All right. I think we have a lot of questions. I think Yasser and me, we can complete these questions, and so that it should be in 10 minutes. So next question is okay. We are up to the question from Krishna. Do you recommend to add review articles? We worked and poster as a research experience under the name of mentor, or should we just list the publication name? So I'll leave it to Dr. Star.
So you can, so if you're mentioning a research experience, mention the big study under that experience if you worked on some big trial. For example, when I did my research experience at Downstate, so I kind of like worked with a mobility trial, which was going on in 20 different institutions throughout the US. But obviously I knew that it will not gonna have my name on it. So I mentioned it under my research experience because now I cannot add it as a submission status. I cannot add it as a provisionally accepted or published status. So then it's totally fine. But if you have published something or submitted something, then mention in the publication section.
Thank you, Dr. Star. Next, I think this on the same line, we have a question from Sadaf. The question is, if publication is in PLOS One in the Journal of Palliative Medicine, is it worthy as published in PubMed?
Yes, PLOS One is a good journal, Journal of Pal Medicine. I think that's also PubMed. Anything you publish in PubMed, you should put it in your city.
Right. Question from Shiz is how to explain research as a third and fourth author. So how to explain? I mean, like if you have published something, you can mention the article, or if you are as like a team and you're adding it as your research experience, then depending on you, if you're a research assistant or even like your trial assistant or whatever the role you are in, then you can mention that experience section. So you want to add Yasser on that part, or?
So yeah, I think here what the person is asking is like if you add a publication and you're third or fourth author or sixth author or something, so how you gonna explain? So let's suppose you're at an interview, program director or any faculty will gonna ask you, hey, this is very interesting article, and do you mind exploring about it? And what was your role in this publication? And then you're gonna explain what you actually did. You did a data extraction, you did a screening of the articles, you actually wrote the initial draft, you did a critical editing. What was your task in this publication? Actually, what happens is like sometimes people just add names to their projects and then they actually don't know how to conduct a research. And that's how they actually want to know whether you actually worked on it or not.
Okay, now the next question is from Afra, and the question is, where can we add research related courses like clinical trial course? It should be like in research experience, or it should be like a volunteer experience. I mean, that's how, if you do like a meta-analysis course from Johns Hopkins, it's like just a volunteer, or maybe you can add into research experience. So Yasser, you want to like comment on that?
So I will say like if you work with any company, for example, and that company have tutored you or educated you how to conduct a research, how to conduct a meta-analysis, things like that, you can put it as a research experience and mention that company's name because you actually learned research from them. So you can put it as a research experience. And whatever projects you published, you can put it in the publication status. So it's totally fine. And there's another way to mention like education, any, I think in the ERAS, there's an education section where you can put all of your courses also.
Okay. I think we have a question of bombarding, but question from Sana is, I have a similar question. Iras, how do we highlight or make our name bold for publication? So I will give it to Yasser. Like I didn't.
I'll say the way to do it, you write it in the Word document and then you copy paste, but make sure you number the publication so that your good paper or like paper in the top journals will gonna show on the top, and like meta-analysis or original studies will show on the top, and then all the medium category will show on the bottom. So that's like a good way to number the articles.
Okay, all right.
And especially your first author. So papers where you're first author, mention it on the top, and then the other authorship, mention it on the bottom.
Okay, the next question we have, I think I don't see the applicant name, but the question is a research focused on super specialties considered bad for IM? I don't think so. Any research is good for internal medicine match, so it's straightforward. Next is, what if I've done ACLS but it's expired by the time I apply? Should I still mention it? No, I think you don't need to mention the expired course there. So then it's just not there. I mean, there's like, because you can't mention the date in an expiry date. So you know what I mean? So it should be like active if you want to mention it. So next question from Anusha is, can I mention in my personal statement that I applied last year but it did not match, as program can see that I applied last year too? I think the same thing that Dr. Kumar explained. If you want to tell that, it's up to you, and you can say your reasons, and I think that's completely acceptable, and that tells I think it's kind of like an honest way to describe your struggle. Next question is from Amber, and his question is, taking history during externship would also be violation of law under supervision. I mean, taking history under supervision, that taking history during externship would also be violation of law. Truly speaking, I mean, you cannot like examine the patient. So when they say examine the patient, it has all the things. It has examination and also like, I think that's what it means. So it does include history taking. So like Dr. Yasser, like, would you?
I think sometimes what happens is, like, as an observer, you do talk to the patient, you get a history, or you observe how to take a history. I think that's still fine as long as you're not examining the patient, because you're actually talking. You're not like physically examining or touching the patient, and you're not making a diagnosis. You're just talking to the patient. That's totally fine. So being observer doesn't mean like you're not allowed to talk. You're just allowed to talk and observe, but you're not allowed to touch the patient. Does that make sense?
All right. Well, we have like a lot of questions. I think I will just skim through I will just select few questions, and then those are common to everyone. So okay, I think we are done with the question. Oh, sorry.
So someone asked about like how fellowship directors look at the ACP national and local posters. Someone asked that. And should one mention, yes, whatever you publish, mention that in your CV, whether it's ACP, local ACP, national ACP, or like national AHA, ACC, whatever organization you sent your abstract or poster.
Okay. I think the other question is like, what if someone has done online ACLS and BLS course but not in person? I think for the certification, as per the US, as we do here, you have to do the hands-on experience for the ACLS. In BLS, if you're, I think, recertifying it, you don't need to be in person, but BLS just online part, if enough, you can mention that. But for ACLS, you have to have like at least one time. For ACLS, every, I think, 1 to 2 years, you have to be in person. So yes. Next question we have is, shall we mention abstract publication under publication section in ERAS? So
yeah, yes, like I showed earlier. So abstract, you should mention as if abstract got published, because every abstract, like when you submit an abstract, it will be published as a supplemental file. So you should mention that as a peer-reviewed publication, because that section have abstracts or articles. But make sure you put the S section, like S25 or whatever supplemental section is.
Well, with that, I think we are over 10 minutes. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Satar, for having your precious time with us. And I'll see how can we help in future. And good luck with your application and everything. And have a good day.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good day.
Good day. Bye-bye.